Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining in. Last year, I had to do this session virtually because of COVID restrictions. So glad to be here in person this time. Before we proceed, I need to confess. Last Christmas, I faced a very difficult questions from my neighbor, Rebecca. She asked me, explain me technically why I was insulted by a leading e-commerce company. The background story, she wanted to bake a near-perfect cake for the occasion. She meticulously prepared a long list of ingredients with some secret ones, ordered online in advance, but unfortunately, the transaction got flagged as a suspicious one. She couldn't get the groceries in time, and the entire experience went downhill. She was furious. You can look at the tweet. And there are many more examples like that, thousands of them. Now, you can see emotions and intensity might vary, but these all were genuine customers who wanted to make a legit transactions but could not. A survey suggests that majority of the customers want both user experience and security. But the financial data suggests that the focus from most of the digital platforms have been on security, and somehow the customer experience has gone for a toss. The Deadly Curve is a science fiction book where the protagonist and team finds a fat-eating bacteria, which could be a miraculous cure for fighting obesity. But to their horror, that fat-eating bacteria starts eating brain cells, and hence causing fatal accidents and crashes. In the next 20 minutes, we'll see how this fictional story is getting realized in the digital fraud prevention space. I'm Ravi. I've been contributing to product and strategy landscape throughout my career. And for the past 5 years, I have leading ecosystem B2C platform products for Rakuten that includes digital identity, loyalty points, payments, and fraud prevention. So we'll start with understanding the landscape of fraud. Then we'll move to understand the financial impact of the false positives. And finally, we'll have a look at how, by perfecting the digital front door, which is authentication innovation, we can address part of the challenge. So let's get started. To comprehend the fraud landscape, let's understand a typical customer journey for a digital product space. It begins with the registration. A customer submits its mobile number or email, and then creates a very quick profile that leads to authentication and the business activity, which will vary from business to business. For e-commerce, it could be shopping. For travel, it will be selecting flights and airline tickets. And for OTT platforms, it would be selecting movies and web series. That follows by profile updates like adding a credit card or the shipping address. And finally, a financial transaction, which is also called checkout. And at the core, there will be data repository and analytics engine, which helps us giving the insights on profile and purchase patterns to create a necessary personality out of the digital identity. Now, in this journey, there can be broadly 4 categories of fraud. The first one, financial friendly fraud. As the name suggests, here, the customer has malicious intent to dispute the charge and get the goods for free. The second one is transaction fraud, where the fraudster uses stolen credit card information to make a purchase to sell those goods later. CNP transactions, which do not require cards to be present at the point of purchase, are very vulnerable for this kind of fraud. The third one is synthetic identity, where fraudster uses stolen ID data to create fake accounts. And finally, account takeover. Here, the account belongs to a legitimate customer, but fraudster uses stolen ID credential to get access to that account. And once they are in, they can do so many things. They can take the money out, they can use the loyalty points, or they can steal the customer data. Beyond lost revenue, account takeovers fraud damages brand reputations and permanently erode the trust of the loyal customers. The financial impact of these frauds are scary. The only silver lining is that customers have started realizing that they want to go for the companies which find a balance between security and user experience. Due to the scare of fraud impact, most of the digital platforms try to focus more on security, and hence causing complicating passwords, which once in every 3 customers forget and trigger forgot password flows. And in case of inconsistent signals, they just deny the transaction. And it makes the customer experience something like a scary adventure. This setup causes many genuine transactions to be blocked, which are called false positives, and some customer-centric companies measure them under the name of customer insult rates. Now let's understand the impact of these false positives. According to industry reports, the cost of false positives far exceed the cost of actual fraud. To comprehend this, we need to look at 2 key metrics. Making the customer's first purchase to our product or service always comes with a cost, because that's the time the customer gets introduced to our brand and start doing business with us. The formula to calculate that is, in numerator, keep all the cost of production, marketing, sales, and promotional discount divided by the number of customers who get acquired by that approach. For retail, it's $10. For e-commerce, it's $80. And you see the cost increases as we move from B2C to B2B because the entire selling process becomes more consultative and customized as per the individual's needs. The other vital part of the strategy is improving the customer retention rates. Now, here the formula varies from industry to industry because purchasing frequency varies accordingly. But on a high level, it is the customers who stick with us. Those customers who made a purchase in the last time period and the percentage of that who are continuing with us, that would be the customer retention rate. And these are not good, and they are dropping over the period. But the data suggests that acquiring new customer is always more than 7 times costly. Loyal customers buy more, and if delighted by the experience, almost every customer repeat the purchases. Now, let's bring all of them together to calculate the impact of a false positive. Let's assume out of 100 transactions of different customers, 2 of them are flagged as a false positive. And 30% of the cases, after this bad experience, customer do not come back to our platform, goes to a competitor or an alternative. Now you can see the impact of that would be substantially high because of high customer acquisition cost and the lost lifetime value. So after understanding the impact of fraud landscape and their financial impact, let's move on how to address this challenge by perfecting the digital front door. What would be an optimal authentication method? It must be minimalistic. It must be risk-based and adaptive. And finally, it should not compromise on the user experience. How to achieve that? These are the sensory inputs that we can collect and create runtime risk profile for every customer. It will include like how a customer reaches to our platform, like an IP, the behavior patterns of the customer, like how he fills any form or how he navigates, device stamps, and the other triggers which can lead to a potential fraud, like high cart value or cart categories. Now, let's extend the example of Rebecca. If she wants to make a transaction and all the signals are consistent, then we can provide the easy, low-friction path, which is something what she knows, which is the password. In the scenario, when a couple of signals are inconsistent, like unrecognized device, she's using it for the first time, or she's logging in from a different time zone, then we can add another layer of something what she has, like a push notification or SMS OTP. And in third scenario, if there are more inconsistencies, like a substantially high cart value based on her previous transactions, we can add another layer of something who she is, like in biometric authentication. Now, in this entire approach, with engaging UI, we can ensure that she feels empathetic about this added friction and feels like that all these steps are necessary for her to make the account secure. But there is a catch. In the entire story, the passwords are the weakest link. The root cause of the problem is that how we interact with our digital platforms. It's always through a hardware. And that's pretty complicated in itself. So we devised a mechanism of shared secrets, passwords, ages back. And it was brilliant. It was simple to implement, simple to execute, but it was simple to guess as well. So we introduced new rules to create complicated passwords and transfer the cognitive load to the customers. Customers identified a strategy. They created a one unique password, and they used it multiple websites, making them very vulnerable to credential stuffing and phishing attacks. And while the experts have been proclaiming the death of passwords, they just don't die. That brings us to the web authentication, where instead of passwords, we use public key cryptography to create a pair, and it's scoped at website level. From the customer's point of view, there are two ways to authenticate. The first one, platform authenticator, which is the device that she can carry around, like a mobile or a laptop with Touch ID and Face ID. The other approach is a roaming authenticator, a specific entity which are used for the authentication purpose, like YubiKey. How does it work? There are two steps, registration and authentication. So when a customer wants to access to a website, the server sends a relying party identifier. Based on that, authenticator creates a public-private key pair and sends the public key back to the server. Now, after this step is done, the public-private key pair is generated, private key is with the authenticator, and public key is with the server. Next time when user wants to access that website, server sends a challenge together with the credential ID. Using the credential ID, authenticator identifies that which key pair is to use, and using the private key, it signs the challenge and sends it back. Authenticator verifies that yes, this public-private key challenge is working, and give access to the customer. The beauty of this entire flow is that there are no passwords involved. And it's two-factor because it covers two things, inherence factor, biometric data, and the possession factor, the customer is having the device. It's scoped at the website level, and hence it's anti-phishing. And the private key and the biometric data never leaves the device, hence it's anti-DB breach as well. And most importantly, no more forgot password flows, and hence huge time taken to reach to the business activity, substantially high in speed. Personalized experiences convert customers from identity numbers to individuals with background, experiences, and aspirations. And digital identity is key in achieving that. Identity is like the customer's shared secret with a trusted companion. And this customer trust can be of significant competitive advantage. We have been seeing leading tech companies branding their ad campaigns around that. So to conclude, not all customers are vocal. Some just simply leave. So we need to measure the false positives or customer insult rates actively and frequently. Second, innovation like risk-based adaptive authentication promises to provide a balance between security and user experience. And maybe in future, with web authentication, it will no longer be a question of choosing one over the other. If the digital front door is perfect, we can have a strong bond between the customer and the business. And then the business can go an extra mile to delight the customer. Look at the example of Rebecca, but this time the situation is contrastly different. She wanted to just change the shoelaces, but because there was no piece of suspicion, the business can go ahead and change the entire shoes and earn a loyal customers for life. We applied these pointers to our global Rakuten ecosystem of 70+ businesses, billion+ customers across the globe, and now we are extending the same internet B2C DNA to the telco domain with Rakuten Symphony. Thanks for your time, and feel free to reach out if you want to know more.